The raiders, people in charge of hunting creatures of the shadow and getting incredible treasures. They are idolized for their work protecting people. Our protagonist Yi-hyun is a D-class warrior raider, who was only hired to serve as a human shield. Woo-min, who works at the raiders agency, contacted the protagonist to offer him a job as part of the front line in a dungeon. Currently, customers much prefer mage raiders over warriors, as they have a better ability to perform large-scale attacks. Yi-hyun regrets not choosing the magician class when he had the chance, because 11 years ago, when he was admitted to the Males Academy, which specializes in training raiders, he had a magic aptitude of 97%, a score even higher than the best magician of that time, who had an aptitude of 92. But despite that, he chose the warrior class, since in those times things were different and mages were basically used as supports. Needing money, Yi-hyun has no choice but to take the job, and Woo-min-san tells him that he will see him tomorrow in the dungeon. The next day, several raiders gather outside the dungeon. Yi-hyun realizes that Woo-min did not appear, but at that moment, an acquaintance of his greets him. His name is Myung and he is a warrior raider just like the protagonist. He buys him a few drinks after finishing that work. After a while, they announce that the raid is about to begin. Upon entering a dungeon, raiders can find immense fortunes, but at the same time, they must be alert to any possible tragedy. This is why the protagonist has the habit of looking at a photo with his mother before entering the dungeons. Once inside, a huge wave of undead attacks the group. A mage orders the warriors to block attacks even though their life depends on it, while they cast their spells safely from the backline. The undead are defeated, and Yi-hyun realizes that his companions are members of the Meteor Clan, which is a guild of mages that has become very popular lately. After a while, the raiders take a short break. All that was missing was the boss's room. Myung asks the protagonist if he has obtained any good object, to which Yi-hyun proceeds to check, but realizes that there is a bug in the Acer system, and it does not allow him to reconnect. At that, an unknown presence tells him to follow the light. The protagonist asks Myung if he also heard the same thing, but he doesn't know what he means. Just after he sees a trail of light and realizes that no one else can see it. The protagonist can't handle his curiosity and decides to follow the trail of light, telling his partner that he will be back in a moment. 20 years ago, a gigantic tree suddenly sprouted in the Pacific Ocean. Some people believed it was a sign of human extinction, while others took it as a blessing. The name of this tree is Yggdrasil, belonging to Norse mythology. After that, monsters began to appear throughout the world and much of humanity was exterminated. But in that moment of desperation, the first awakened one appeared, a man capable of using the power of the gods. After that, more awakened people progressively appeared, and among them, some dedicated themselves to hunting monsters. They are what you know today as raiders. The Acer system is a weapon that humanity has thrived on. So, the fact that it's failing, it can be a negative thing. After a while, the protagonist finds himself in front of a treasure door, which are hidden rooms that appear very rarely and contain special objects that usually sell for thousands of dollars. Yi-hyun enters the room and finds an object on a pedestal. He takes it and we see that it is the Lost Eye of Odin, which is the only mythical object in the world and gives the user an ability called Universal Derivation, which allows him to destroy magic and copy it by saving it in a carte blanche. The protagonist knows that such an object could sell for millions of dollars, so he plans to sell it in order to leave Raider's life and not have to continue being a human shield in the dungeons. Temptation gets the better of him, and he tries to try the item at least once, not realizing that once equipped it can no longer be removed. Fortunately for him, the system warns him of this and he manages to cancel it, saving it in his inventory and returning to where the others were. Since dungeons are a lawless place, announcing that you have found such a valuable item would be like asking to be murdered. So he decides to go unnoticed. The raiders are about to enter the boss room, but just then the ceiling collapses and a poisonous mist spreads around. Myung tells the protagonist that they have to get out of there quickly, but he is stabbed in the back, dying in front of Yi-hyun, who instinctively flees the place. The protagonist comes to the conclusion that these actions are not those of a monster, but must be dungeon killers, who surely have the goal of annihilating the Meteor Guild. Behind the protagonist, a mysterious man appears, who attacks him with lightning in the form of a chain. The man gets even closer and we see that it is Woo-min, who warned the protagonist that he would see him in the dungeon. Yi-hyun asks why he does this, to which Woo-min replies that it was a request from his client, since many people hate the Meteor Guild for belittling the other guilds. The protagonist would like to take revenge for those who fought together with him in the front line, but he is aware that he could not against him, as he is a Class A mage. So he decides to keep silent, and tells Wu Min that he will pretend that nothing happened. But he again attacks the protagonist, who manages to dodge him narrowly. He tells him that today's target is not just the Meteor Guild, and continues to attack him repeatedly. The protagonist cannot understand why they are also after him, and wonders if there is anyone who wishes for his death. That's when he remembers the dark silhouette of a man. It was his father, so he asks Wu Min if he was the one who sent him. To which he mockingly replies that he is very intelligent for having got it right. Yi-hyun asks her if 5 years ago she is the same person who ordered her mother to be killed, which he also got right. The protagonist is filled with rage and Wu Min proceeds to say goodbye to him forever. But the protagonist uses the object he found earlier, achieving great magical force. Wu Min, desperate to see such power, decides to finish it once and for all and throws one of his chains directly at the protagonist with the intention of killing him. But Yi-hyun easily disperses the spell and a message appears saying that he has a white card to use, thus copying the chain lightning ability and threatening Wu Min to kill him in the most painful way. Wu Min can't believe that a simple D-class warrior would be able to use a spell that took him years to learn. The protagonist launches his attack, and Wu Min desperately creates a magic shield to carry himself. But the protagonist uses his universal derivation ability again, scattering the shield and thus directly impacting Wu Min. He asks him for mercy, begging him not to kill him. But Yi-hyun executes it in cold blood. After that he faints and gradually loses consciousness, regretting having to die just after having obtained such a valuable object. But unexpectedly, a notification appears, offering him a new operating system and that in doing so he will be sent to the past at the time he wants the most. The protagonist does not understand what is happening, but he accepts anyway. The Aesir system is changed to the Nornir system, and after that, Yi-hyun finds himself in front of some Norse angels, who seem to support him. From now on he is considered Aesir's adversary, and he was granted a couple of passive abilities that we will learn about later. The protagonist then wakes up in his room, several years younger. Yi-hyun doesn't understand what's going on and wonders if it's just a dream. But if so, he would never want to wake up, to be able to see his mother alive again. A mission is assigned to him, which consists of resting until he recovers almost completely, and as a reward he will be given a blank card with which he will be able to copy another skill. The protagonist looks at the date and realizes that it is just before applying to the Raiders Academy. So he does not think of making the same mistake twice, and in this life he decides to be a magician. Later, his mother notices that there is something different about him, so she worries and asks if everything is okay. In order not to raise suspicion, Yi-hyun tells her that she only had a nightmare, and after that she tells her about her change of plans regarding the class she will choose. This surprises his mother. Since he was a child he has wanted to be a warrior class, but she also supports him in his decision. In order to take revenge against his father, Yi-hyun trains until the moment he finishes his mission, and we see how he gets very suckly. The protagonist starts planning his abilities. The passive ability of the Observed by the Gods has the effect of increasing all his stats when he levels up. As for attack abilities, she can currently be fixed with Chain Lightning, so she plans to prioritize getting a healing spell. For back then, although the Raider mages were underestimated, those with healing abilities were the exception because of their great utility, and they were treated like the nobility. The problem is that finding an awakened one with healing abilities would not be an easy thing. But in a timely manner, Yi-hyun receives a call from Yu-jung, who was a childhood friend and would later become his best friend, having the dream of attending the Raiders Academy along with the protagonist. But unfortunately, she dies. The protagonist suffers when he remembers this, but he decides to change his destiny in this life. She invites him to a lecture given by Saint Yosung, who is an awakened possessor of a healing magic called Sacrifice. The protagonist cannot miss this opportunity and quickly leaves his house. Meanwhile, in a limousine is Yosung along with his driver Sunyi, who can't help but worry about the saint's condition, as her ability, Sacrifice, consumes some of her life force. And if it continues at that rate, it could collapse soon. Once at the conference venue, they both await the arrival of Yosung, Yanawa Guild Master and one of the first healer raiders, who would soon fall into a critical condition for overusing her ability. The saint begins her speech by inviting all those awakened to become raiders in order to save innocent people and make the world a better place. This is because a large percentage of awakened people do not want to fight monsters. Even Yi-hyun himself wanted to sell his mythical item to get rid of that burden. After that, the friends say goodbye and the protagonist goes in search of Yosung. He crosses paths with Sunyi, who tells him that right now the teacher doesn't have time to attend to fans, but the protagonist interrupts him by telling him that he knows about Yo-sung's disease and claims to have the cure for it. Sunyi gets very upset at the thought that the boy is joking, but the teacher is curious about what she has just heard and takes it to her office. She asks him how he plans to cure her, and Yihyun unsurrounds mentions that he plans to copy her ability. Sunyi is again annoyed that it seems silly to her, because sacrifice is Yo-sung's unique ability. While normal skills can be memorized, there is no way to learn a unique skill. These are skills that only a single person possesses or that were inherited from their relatives and are even rarer than S classification skills. Despite this, the protagonist insists that if he couldn't do it, he wouldn't have even looked for them. In addition, to heal the penalties of an ability, a skill of equal or higher rank is required, and since sacrifice does not allow her to heal herself, she has no choice but to accept it. Yo-sung shows him his ability, and the protagonist uses the carte blanche he had to copy it. After that, Yihyun shows them how he is able to use sacrifice, and they are both amazed to witness it. Thus began the negotiations. The protagonist tells her that in exchange for curing her, she has to become her sponsor, since to grow as a raider, you need money and connections. To which she replies that she is willing to accept, but on one condition, which is that Yihyun joins the Manhwa Guild, since it would be very beneficial to have someone with her qualities in the guild, in addition to, of course, to find her quite attractive. The protagonist prefers to work on his own, but he knows that to really grow, it is necessary to enter a guild, and what better than the Manhwa Guild, which is currently number 1. But before making a decision, he tells her that he will heal her first, so he uses his new sacrifice ability and Yo-sung instantly feels a great improvement in his health. Sunyi apologizes to the protagonist for the treatment he gave her earlier. Yo-sung is completely cured and can't help but be shocked to tears. He thanks Yihyun and asks if he is not happy about receiving the penalty for his ability. What he doesn't know is that being a copied ability, the penalties are not applied to the protagonist. In the same way, he responds that if that happens, then they should only heal each other. Yo-sung agrees, and tells the protagonist that if he needs anything he just has to ask him. To which he quickly tells you that there is indeed something he would like to ask for. The next day, Sunyi takes the protagonist to the place she requested. A low-rank dungeon belonging to the Manhwa Guild. This in order to train to level up before entering the Miles Academy and competing against the best raiders. Yihyun and Sunyi meet in front of the guild-owned dungeon. Sunyi hands the protagonist a staff and warns him that despite being a low-ranking dungeon, it is dangerous to enter alone. So he asks if he's sure about doing so. Yihyun replies that his intention is to level up, so it will be better if he does it alone. As such, Sunyi gives him a stone that he can break to return to the guild in case he is in danger. He tells him to take it as a sign of apology for having been rude to him before. The protagonist thanks him and proceeds to enter the dungeon. But when he sets foot inside, he is surrounded by shadows and the Nornir system transports him to a new area, specifically to Jelgium, the land of the dead. Meanwhile, Yo-sung is curious about the protagonist, wondering if he will be able to clear a dungeon by himself. At that, Hana, one of his assistants, gives him some documents with Yihyun's profile. Yo-sung is impressed to see that the protagonist had requested the warrior class, but he is even more impressed to see the very high percentage of aptitude he has as a mage. So he calls Sunyi and asks her to take the protagonist to a meeting when he returns from the dungeon, as he wants to personally check the talent he possesses. Meanwhile, Yihyun finds himself in a place similar to a cemetery and is attacked by an archer skeleton, who manages to graze him with one of his arrows with paralyzing poison. The protagonist is quickly healed by the sacrifice ability, and more enemies continue to emerge, surrounding him completely. On the other hand, Yoo-jung was in her room, very upset with the protagonist for having left her alone on the day of Yo-sung's lecture. In addition, he can't help but worry about his friend, who changed too much overnight, so he sends him messages threatening to regret it the next time he sees him. This unconsciously sends shivers down Yihyun's spine, who thinks this is due to being cornered by various spectral monsters. The protagonist takes out the staff he was given earlier and proceeds to fight the enemies. But due to his little experience as a magician and being so used to fighting with a sword, he ends up breaking the staff. Fortunately for him, he is in Jelgium, the land of the dead ruled by Jel, daughter of Loki. A place where those who were killed came back to life as undead, which was perfect for his new ability, which when used on the undead, changes the ability to heal for a powerful area attack. Yihyun doesn't hesitate to use it, and easily kills all the undead. The protagonist plans to use the stone given to him by Sunyi to return to the base, but at that moment he senses a terrifying presence behind him. When he turns around, he cannot see anything, but he is suffocated by the strong pressure of that presence. This prevents him from moving, so he self-harms to regain consciousness and flee the scene. But he is quickly hit by a huge shadow, which was the boss of the dungeon. Yi-hyun instantly senses the difference in power between the two, so he proceeds to remove the stone from the inventory. But he is hit hard by the night shadow, dropping the stone and being very badly injured. The boss stands in front of him and later attacks the protagonist with the intention of finishing him off. Yi-hyun recognizes that he is unable to dodge that attack, so he has no choice but to accept his death. But surprisingly, the shadow's movement stopped just before impacting the protagonist. A female voice is heard, who tells the monster to stop, since that child is a special guest that she herself brought to that place. We see that it is Jel, the ruler of the land of the dead. She approaches the protagonist, and cannot believe that someone so young is the chosen one as the adversary of the Aesir. Still, he likes the look in his eyes and tells the protagonist that he has to get stronger quickly as Ragnarok is approaching. Otherwise, if she doesn't, she will be the one to kill him with her own hands. Being a very important pawn to them, he decides to give him another chance, so he gives him 2 months to become stronger and defeat the Night Shadow before that time. At that point, a new main quest is assigned to him, and as a reward for completing it, Jel will give him a special gift. But the penalty if it fails, will be death. Jel leaves telling the protagonist that she is eager to see his evolution and that she will pray that he succeeds in his mission. After that, Yi-hyun wakes up outside the dungeon, his wounds completely healed. Upon seeing the mission, he realizes that it was not just a dream, so one thing is for sure. He has to become stronger so that he does not have to suffer the fury of the goddess Jel. In addition, he thinks it is positive to have a goal to achieve in the short term. So he has to start getting used to fighting like a mage and not like a warrior. At that moment he receives messages from Sunyi, who tells him that Yosung is interested in talking to him in person to finish formalizing the contract with the guild. The next day, Sunyi guides him to the guild master, who is very excited to see the protagonist again and tells him that she had been waiting for him. Yi-hyun greets her and they begin to talk about the contract. The protagonist says that he has a condition to add, which is that she teaches him about magic, helping him to become familiar with the correct way to cast spells. Yosung finds it an interesting proposal, but before that he needs to prove his talent, so he puts the condition of subjecting him to a test known as the Mana Cube. The protagonist finds it a rather challenging test, since only 7% of awakened mages have been able to pass such a test. However, Yosung tells him that even if he fails, the contract still stands. After all, he's only interested in seeing Yi-hyun's potential. Sunyi begins preparations and the protagonist proceeds to enter the cube. Sunyi tells the teacher that she can't help but worry, as although she recognizes Yi-hyun's talent, he is still just a child. However, Yosung is completely convinced that he will be able to do it. Inside the cube, Yi-hyun is in a deep ocean made of mana. He can breathe without problems, but he worries about contracting the disease of mana addiction, which occurs from being exposed to highly concentrated mana for a long time, and in extreme cases could even cause death. So the priority is to find a way out of all those mana swirls. The protagonist concentrates to be able to feel the waves, and at that moment, he perceives a different current. So he follows that path and comes across a crystal that contained an overwhelming amount of mana. Meanwhile, outside the cube, Sunyi asks Yosung about how long it will take for the protagonist to get out of there. Yosung responds that she was the fastest in the country, completing the test in just 40 minutes. Both agree that there can only be two possible outcomes. Either the protagonist will not be able to overcome the cube, or he will create a new record by surpassing the clan master. At that moment they observe something that leaves them surprised. The cube began to crack. Incredulous at what they saw, Sunyi checks the timer and realizes that it has been only 10 minutes since the protagonist entered the cube. The cracks are because what Yi-hyun found was the core of the cube, so breaking it destabilized it. Managing to complete the test in just 10 minutes, a time that far exceeds the current record belonging to a magician named Camila, who had broken the cube in 36 minutes. Yosung and Sunyi are shocked by such a feat, who congratulate him enthusiastically. Yosung asks him how he managed to break the cube so quickly, and he explains that he simply broke the glass that was in the cube, which leaves her surprised, as it means that the mana that Yi-hyun possesses exceeds all the mana that was inside the cube. With this done, Yo-sung agrees to turn the protagonist into the best magician and officially welcomes him to the Manhwa Guild. Later, Yoo-jung along with the protagonist's mother are waiting for him outside his house, and are surprised to see him arrive aboard a luxury car moments later in the protagonist's room. Yoo-jung questions him about his sudden decisions to change classes. But because he can't tell him that in the future things will change in favor of the mages, he decides to change the subject and asks him how it is possible that he spends more time there than in his own home. This is because Yoo-jung comes from a very influential family. His parents are dedicated to dismantling monster corpses, so they are constantly traveling to different countries. As a result of this, Yoo-jung is often left alone at home, so her parents prefer to leave her in charge of Yi-hyun's house. The protagonist takes advantage of this and asks her to teach him some magical theory, to which the girl accepts on the condition of fulfilling a wish in the future. The friends have a good quality time together and the protagonist seems quite happy. Meanwhile, in another part of the world, a man surrounded by crows was hunting some beasts. It is none other than Min Seonju, the father of the protagonist. One of his companions praises him because thanks to him they were able to complete the dungeon without problems. He invites him to join his guild, but Seonju tells him that he has no intentions of joining any guild. Despite this, the man greedily insists that he join, which bothers the father of the protagonist, because humans seem to him a vulgar and greedy species. However, he spares his life by leaving the place and erasing his memories in some way. Yi-hyun and Yo-sung are about to start their first magic lesson, but before that, she asks him to show her skills in a practice battle. He begins by asking him to try to attack her. The protagonist prepares himself and puts himself in an attack position, specifically in a typical warrior stance. Yi-hyun throws the first punch, but Yo-sung manages to stop his fist without much effort. The protagonist backs away, surprised because despite being a healer, his teacher is quite strong. After all, she is a raider of that rank. She tells him that he should leave behind his warrior habits, since the main difference between the two classes is the ability to fight at long range. Being now mage class, if he continues to fight at close range against his opponents, he will quickly fall due to his low defense. Yo-sung decides to get serious to teach him how real magicians fight and tells him that he has nothing to worry about, because if he gets hurt she will heal him herself. Without further ado, he casts a spell on the protagonist, who narrowly manages to dodge it. After that, she responds with a chain of lightning. The protagonist believes that she directly impacted Yo-sung, but the reality is that she moved so fast that when the protagonist realized it was too late, and she receives the full attack of her teacher. Fortunately, it manages to resist it quite well. Yo-sung then launches an even stronger attack on him. Yi-hyun uses universal bypass and destroys the girl's spell. He then attempts a surprise attack by summoning one of his chains from the ground, but Yo-sung manages to block it thanks to his high reflexes. Still, she's impressed that a beginner magician like him is capable of having so much magical power. Yi-hyun begins to run out of mana, so Yo-sung takes advantage of this and with a quick movement knocks down the protagonist, who ends up lying on the ground without knowing what has just happened. Yo-sung sarcastically asks him if he thought he would win and then helps him up. The protagonist is left thinking about the huge difference between him and a raider of that one rank. But Yo-sung tells him that he has done quite well, and that watching him he realized that Yi-hyun has the potential to learn a fighting style that no one else has achieved. So he officially congratulates him on becoming his first apprentice. Back home, Yi-hyun kept thinking about this, while standing next to Yoo-jung studying the existing types of magic. Yoo-jung complains that while other magicians, including her, take months to learn a spell, the protagonist only needs a couple of days. Yi-hyun replies that this is why he decided to change classes, but in that he manages to see a memory of his father, who whispered something to him and wonders if he really chose that path of his own free will. This leaves him distracted, wondering if it was just his imagination. But he can't afford to waste time, so he starts thinking about something more productive. Remember that in the future there is a precious pill that promises to be of great help to raiders around the world, so he marks it as his new target. Meanwhile, Sunyi asks the teacher if she really thinks the protagonist is capable of learning the fighting style she was talking about. She replies that she has no doubts, and is convinced that if another magician of rank that appears in the future, it will be Yi-hyun. Going back to the protagonist's target, the mana boosting pill, it was a pill that permanently increased the mana of the awakened, making it a highly coveted item among mages. This pill would not be invented for another 5 years, when a young alchemist would make public the recipe to prepare it. So Yihyun is currently the only one who knows her. But despite this, his attempts to prepare it are a complete failure. Frustrated by this, he has no choice but to move to Plan B, which consists of personally meeting Lee Yi-song, the alchemist who would have invented the pill. Looking back, remember that he should currently be in the first year of the Miller's Academy. So the protagonist quickly heads towards that place. When the first awakened disappeared without a trace, a man known as Kuik Blade appeared to take his place as the first S-class raider in Korea. This man's name was Lee Yishin, who is the father of the person the protagonist is looking for right now. The protagonist gets a temporary pass to enter the Miller's Academy, a place full of bad memories in his past life. However, this would not interfere with his goal, and he enters to find the alchemist boy. Yi-song was a boy who didn't have much talent for sparring, so the likelihood of him being in a training room was very low. At that moment, he realizes that a group of people were watching how a boy was bothered by others. No one was brave enough to help him for fear of getting hurt. Yihyun enters determined to break up the fight. And at that moment, someone bumps into him. A bully-looking guy asks him who the hell he is and tells him to get out if he doesn't want to get hurt. But at that moment, the protagonist realizes that the boy they were bothering was Lee Yi-song, whom he was looking for. Yihyun found Lee Yi-song, the one who would help him make the mana boost pill he needed. He was being teased by a bully, so he asks if he needs help. The guy approaches the protagonist and asks him if he is Yi-song's older brother, and it seems strange that they don't look very similar. He tells him that in any case, he has unfinished business with the boy and threatens him by telling him that he better wait outside if he does not want to end up in a bad situation. Yihyun completely ignores him, pushing his hand away and telling the boy that it would be better for them to go to the infirmary together. This infuriates the bully, so he grabs the protagonist by the neck and asks him if he wants to die. Yihyun is quite upset with this, as it is the second time he has been grabbed by the neck recently. So putting into practice the theory she learned about magic with her friend Yu-jung and her combat skills learned with her teacher Yo-sung, he shoots a holy arrow at the bully, who is quite affected by the attack. People around start muttering that maybe the bully guy isn't as strong as he seems. Worried about his reputation, he decides to play dirty, taking a sword from his inventory and aiming directly at the protagonist's head. Yi-song yells at her to be careful. At that moment, Yihyun remembers one of her teacher's teachings, which consists of how to create a shield by wrapping her body with mana. So he blocks the attack easily and the sword flies off, leaving the guy completely unarmed. Yihyun takes advantage of this to grab his face, and with a rather intimidating face tells him that he shouldn't have messed with him, finishing him off with another holy arrow straight to his face, who is completely unconscious after this. Yi-song is surprised to see how the protagonist defeated that guy so easily. Seeing it on the floor, Yihyun recognizes that maybe it was a bit drastic, so he has no choice but to take an item out of his inventory. It is a healing potion that the protagonist had planned to use in a different situation. Yi-song reacts strangely to seeing the object. Yihyun uses the potion, dropping it directly on the bully's face, being quite effective and healing his wounds almost instantaneously. After this, Yihyun insists on the boy going to the infirmary. Yi-song doesn't seem very convinced, but he still accepts. On the way, he realizes that the path they are taking does not go to the infirmary, and that the real intention of the protagonist was to take him to a place where no one could hear them. So he comes to the conclusion that he came looking for him because he knows who he is and the talent he possesses. He asks him if it was his father who sent him to look for him. Yihyun notices his distrust of him, so he quickly makes it clear that no one sent him, and that he simply has a favor to ask of him, telling him that he would like him to make him a certain pill. Yi-song, frightened, replies that he has no idea how to do those things. But the protagonist takes out the potion he used before and confesses that he knows that he was the one who made it and sold it on the black market. So he knows that he has a great knowledge of alchemy. Yi-song is quite surprised by this, as it is impossible for him to have traced it through the black market, since it is a transaction system that completely hides the identity of the sellers. In fact, it is so certain that the protagonist previously had planned to sell the lost eye of Odin through that system. Despite continuing to deny it, it was evident that Yi-song was lying. Because if his father found out about something like that, he would surely end up dead. So he begs the protagonist to keep it a secret. The protagonist reassures him, telling him that he simply needs a good alchemist who is capable of concocting the elixirs he needs. Yi-song begins to have a little more confidence in the protagonist and tells him that he will listen to his proposal. Later, in Yi-song's room, Isong asks him about the pill he had mentioned earlier. Yi-hyun mentions that it is a pill that increases a person's mana permanently. The boy is surprised to hear this, because it seems very strange to him that something like this is possible. What he does not know is that it is he himself who would invent it in the future. After this, they start thinking about the possible ingredients based on the desired effect. Yi-hyun is shocked to see this, as Isong's aura had completely changed, going from being a stuttering child to being a highly talented alchemist. However, he tells him that if he needs such a powerful elixir, it would be a better idea to ask another alchemist, as he does not have enough means. The protagonist flatly refuses, telling the boy that he is the right alchemist to carry out the project, and proposes to provide him with what he needs. Even so, the boy worries that he will fail in the attempt and leave the protagonist with financial losses. But he quickly tells you that there is no problem with that. After all, every investment has its risks. And if he decides to take them, it's because he's confident that he has the necessary ability. This is quite moving to Isong, since after having lost his mother at a young age and his father never giving him approval due to his lack of talent as a raider, it is the first time that anyone firmly believes in him. So she is moved to tears. The protagonist is glad to have completed his first objective, which was to make a connection with the alchemist who created the pill. Time passes, and we see how the time remaining to complete Hell's mission is only 11 days. Meanwhile, Yi-hyun continues to train with his teacher Yosung, who recognizes that the protagonist has improved a lot as a magician. It even cracked its barrier. But when they are both about to get even more serious in battle, Sunyi stops them and tells them that it was enough training for today. Although the reality was that if he hadn't stopped them, the training room would have ended up completely destroyed despite being built with a super-resistant material. Yosung congratulates him on his progress and asks him if he was studying theory about magic. The protagonist tells him that his friend Yoo-jung was helping him with that. Yosung is happy about this, because she was worried since she had not been able to help him with that. After this, he tells him that with his current abilities he will have no problem with E-rank dungeons. Not knowing that last time he had actually faced a C-rank boss. Sometime later, we see Isong looking quite tired, but with a perfectly made pill in his hands. Yi-hyun thanks him for working so hard and proceeds to consume the pill, which instantly increases the magical stat of the protagonist considerably, being surprised by the incredible effect it had and glad to have gone to Isong, since if he had taken the ingredients to any other alchemist, the pill would not have been even half as effective. So he praises him for his talent and once again thanks him for his help, advising him to take a good rest after his hard work. Isong thanks him for trusting him and tells him that if he needs anything else he just has to ask him. After this, the protagonist retreats, determined to defeat Night Shadow the next day. To which Hell has a hunch that they would soon have visitors in the land of the dead. Once at the dungeon gate, the protagonist equips a set of gadgets that together grant him the passive ability Mana Extortion. He proceeds to re-enter the dungeon, and is again transferred to Chelkheim, the land of the dead. Just by arriving, he can sense the sinister magical power of Night Shadow, so he begins to look for him to defeat him and thus be able to reunite with Hell. An archer skeleton shoots at him, but Yi-hyun deflects the arrow with a mana barrier. More enemies are starting to appear, so it's the perfect time to put the new battle style she's been training with her master to the test. This style was called Battle Magician, which consisted of a hybrid profession, using both magical power and martial arts. Until now, no one had been successful in mastering this style, but for the protagonist it would be different. Easily managing to finish off all monsters based on long-range spells and physical attacks with melee techniques. Meanwhile, Sunyi, who was supervising outside the dungeon, senses a strange presence approaching the place. Which seems strange to him, since the report said that no one but him would be there, so he pulls out a gun. A car approaches, and a worker from a neighboring curator guild named Yeonjo gets out. Sunyi puts away her gun and asks her why she is there. She replies that it was for work reasons, in addition to wanting to see him. Sunyi doesn't believe in the latter, as they were college classmates and she had never contacted him since they graduated. Yeonjo gets straight to the point and asks if the rumor that Master Yosung is sick is true. Sunyi, annoyed, replies that it's obviously just a rumor, and asks where the hell he heard something like that. She replies that she has many contacts, implying that the Curator Guild has hired spies to infiltrate the Lotus Guild. Sunyi thanks her for letting him know. Before leaving, she mentions that she has one more question, asking him if by chance he knows the boy in the photo and the reason why lately he frequently goes to the Lotus Guild building, meeting repeatedly with the guild representative. Sunyi refuses to give him information, telling her that this is none of the business for a member of another guild. Similarly, Yeonjo did not expect him to tell her, so she says goodbye to him and leaves the place. Meanwhile, Yihyun finds himself sitting on a pile of dead enemies, when suddenly, the boss of the dungeon appears. The protagonist receives him with a sacred arrow in his face, telling him that he is happy to see him again, and that this time things will be different. This enrages the monster and he quickly attacks the protagonist, but manages to dodge him with ease. While he continued to attack him with his sacred arrows, the dark shadow continued to attack him uncontrollably, but surprisingly Yihyun had no problem dodging its attacks. This makes the dungeon boss nervous, who realizes that the protagonist was about to launch his lightning chains, managing to deflect them. However, the protagonist changes the direction of his chains and manages to tie up his enemy, leaving him completely immobile and unable to dodge a hail of sacred arrows. This seriously affects the boss, who after that breaks the chains and emits a very powerful energy. This is because the monster had entered a new phase called Berserker. It greatly increased both his dexterity and strength. As if this were not enough, the protagonist receives a curse which consisted of dying suddenly if he did not meet the condition to remove him, which was to defeat Night Shadow in less than 10 minutes. The protagonist attempts to repel the curse using universal bypass, but fails in the attempt. At that moment, he realizes that what is happening is Hell's doing, shouting that it is not fair for him to interfere in that way. Having no choice, he turns to the dungeon boss with the intention of killing him as soon as possible. But instead of fighting the protagonist, he flees from it. He realizes that by simply prolonging the fight, the carrier would die. Yihyun notices that he is provoking him, so in order to quickly finish him off, he needs to use his ability of greater area of attack, which is Light Judgment. But before he can throw it, Night Shadow uses his ability, which leaves the protagonist under the fear penalty that leaves him immobile until he receives a blow. The monster takes advantage of this to deal a powerful blow to the protagonist, who suffers a lot from this attack, but in turn manages to dispel the fear. The protagonist begins to think about how to defeat him, realizing that by blinding him he will be unable to flee again. So it activates an ability called Wind Boost, which increases its speed quite a bit. The boss backs away seeing this. However, this was part of the protagonist's plan, who throws a blinding bomb directly at the shadow's position. He managed to get close to him quickly. The monster, in desperation, lets out a fierce scream, calling several undead to help him. Fortunately, it was too late, as the protagonist activates the Judgment of Light, killing all of them, including the boss of the dungeon, managing to defeat him in the last 5 seconds and getting rid of the curse he had, getting the title of He Who Passed the First Test. After this, the protagonist receives a message from Hell, who told him that he now understands why they chose him and invited him to their temple. We see how the mark of death is undone, and the protagonist gets a large amount of stat points, as well as a couple of pieces of equipment. After that, the protagonist is transported to another place, which is the Temple of Hell. There he is greeted by Garm, the temple's guard dog, who in a not very cordial way throws himself at the protagonist, but stops just by hearing the voice of Jel, who ordered him to escort him to the castle. He immediately follows the order and guides Yihyun to the interior of the castle. There appears Jel, who congratulates the protagonist for having passed his test. Yihyun gets straight to the point and asks why he gave him that test. She replies that it is her destiny to become the great enemy of the Aesir, someone who will kill the strongest god, Odin. That's what Loki and the others want for him. Yihyun doesn't understand why they have to use him for their convenience, but Jel tells him that he doesn't need him to understand. It's simply his destiny. The world is heading to its end because Odin wants to have everything under his feet and they need his power to stop him. After this, he sends the protagonist back to his world, without giving him a chance to continue questioning things and telling him to keep becoming strong. Back on Earth, Yihyun is frustrated that he has returned without having resolved his doubts. However, he notices that the reward Jel promised him had arrived. It was a passive ability that nullified any bad state of the user. After having transported Yihyun, Jel notices the presence of someone who was spying on them, asking him what he was doing there without being invited. That presence apologizes for his lack of manners, making us see that he is the giant of wisdom Mimir. He tells Jel that he couldn't wait to ask her what she thought of the great adversary after seeing him face to face. She responds that although it is too early to reach a conclusion, she admits that she has grown faster than expected. However, he questions what he and Loki are up to. Mimir tells him that he can't tell her at the moment. Jel accepts it, But she does not intend to wait without doing something herself, and because according to prophecy the great adversary will have many obstacles in his way, she sends a guide who will always lead him on the right path. Days later, Yi-hyun reunites with Hana. This because the guild master wants to give him some gifts since he will soon enter the male's academy. Together they head to a huge shopping mall. Hana buys some things for Yi-hyun and he is surprised by the exaggerated price of the weapons. Hana says that the academy provides equipment for new students, but they are not of good quality, so the teacher preferred that she bring her own equipment. The list of things to buy was enormous, contrary to the expectation of the protagonist who only expected to receive 1 or 2 artifacts at most. Next on the list was to look for good armor, but Yi-hyun tells her that it's not necessary, as she already has one. The shadow armor he gained from defeating Night Shadow possesses the hidden ability once equipped. The protagonist was thinking out loud, so Hana thought that she needed some artifact with such an ability, which would be difficult to get in that place. After all, the only raider with that ability in Korea is his brother, Park Sun-yi. Yi-hyun is shocked, because he did not imagine it since both transmit very different vibes. After that, they continue looking for more artifacts, but at that moment the protagonist manages to see again those particles he saw in the treasure door. So without thinking twice, he goes where he is led and with his eye skill he manages to see through an illusion, finding himself in front of a strange object. After that, a new character is introduced. In the middle of a duel we see how one boy defeats another with extreme ease. This is Han Oyen, who is known as the future S rank raider. His father tells him that he has done a good job, but that he should not be happy, because it is a game that he should win easily. After that, he tells him to prepare for the next thing on the agenda, but before that he takes a bath. Oyen feels dissatisfied and tired, because he has a mechanical life in which he has no right to choose for himself. That was not the raider he wanted to become. Back with our protagonist, we see that the object he found is called Mistiltine, which increases the user's ability to detect magical power. At that moment, Yi-hyun and Oyen cross paths. This is because Oyen was also about to enter the academy, so together with his father they went to buy equipment for him. Oyen asks his father if he really needs that many things, to which he replies that it's not too much for a future S rank raider. However, Oyen questions him about the amount of money he is spending on it, as he is worried about running out of money for his mother's medical expenses. His father arrogantly replies that these are his problems and that he should concentrate on continuing to train. The young man is unable to contradict his father, so he simply accepts. In her childhood, upon her awakening, her mother smiled warmly. Since then he dreamed of being a raider. He was a ray of hope for his mother, however. For his father, he was nothing more than a tool. From then on he became a machine that simply obeyed his father's orders. Suddenly, an alert sound is heard in the mall, warning that there has been a dungeon break nearby and monsters have appeared around the city. They recommend their customers to stay calm and take cover while the raiders are on their way. Oyen's father orders him to take cover, since if he gets hurt he will be at a disadvantage in the academy entrance event. However, Oyen knows that even if the raiders are on their way, in the time it takes them to get there many people can be injured. So he seizes the opportunity and for the first time disobeys his father's orders, running straight to where the monsters are to prove his independence as the raider he would like to show his mother. But when he came face to face with a large horde of goblins, he stood motionless, frozen by fear because despite his great talent, he had never faced a real situation. The goblins approach him, and when one of them is about to attack him, Yi-hyun lands on him, saving Oyen. He is impressed by the heroic act of the protagonist, who immediately recognizes him by his fame as an aspiring S-rank raider. Going back a few minutes, the protagonist bought the object he saw. Hana runs up to him and asks him why he bought a rock in the corner of unknown objects. Yi-hyun realizes that to other people's eyes, that object looks like a simple rock. Then, hearing the alert sound, he rushed to the rescue without a second thought, jumping from a high floor of the building and scoring an incredible heroic landing, defeating a large number of goblins with minimal effort, to the point of encountering Oyen. There he tells him that he will need his help to protect people, when suddenly a goblin tries to attack him behind his back, but the protagonist defeats him without having to turn to look at him. This impresses Oyen and motivates him to get up to save people and fulfill his dream of being a great raider. Yi-hyun tells him that he needs him to get the attention of the goblins and that he must make sure that he does not let a single one escape in order to ensure the safety of the people. Hei without hesitation gets to work, activating a powerful ability called Shout of Taunt. At that moment, Absolutely all the goblins fix their gaze on him. The protagonist is a little impressed, since to use that skill you need a fairly high level, so he realizes that he really is a talented guy. However, the maximum rank that Oyen reached in the future before Yihyun went back in time was the B rank. This because due to his mental weakness he was unable to progress and was known as the unlucky genius. That said, the protagonist sets out to fix his mentality, because if Oyen is strengthened he could be useful to the protagonist. Together they continued to defeat the goblins to the point where not a single one of them remained. At that moment a man arrives at the place. Kyunhoo, who came from the raiders agency. He asks them if they took care of all those goblins, to which they reply that they did. Kyunhoo wonders how he will report that situation to his superiors, to which Yihyun tells him to simply say that the agency took care of it. After all, no one would believe that two simple young men killed all those goblins. However, he replies that being a government organization they cannot cover up that kind of thing. But if you want not to draw too much attention you can support him in that. In addition to this, they have to give them a reward for that heroic act. Yihyun tells him to give his share to Oyen and to keep it a secret that he was there. This is because he does not need money, as he has the support of the Lotus Guild, and it would also be more beneficial to have Oyen in debt to him. However, Oyen disagrees with this, as he says that it was Yihyun who defeated the goblins. Even so, the protagonist tells him that he has his reasons. His plan is to keep a low profile before entering the academy, because he does not want to risk attracting his father's attention. His revenge has to be discreet. Oyen is still unhappy to take all the credit for something he didn't do, but that money can be of help to his mother's condition, because without treatment she could die. Yihyun tells him that what he did was very significant, because if he had hesitated, some goblin could have escaped and injured someone. Finally Oyen decides to accept, but not before telling the protagonist that he will pay him for it when the time comes. Before leaving, Hiri asks him to please tell him his name and number. The protagonist tells him that he does not need to talk to him in such a formal way since they are the same age and both will enter the male's academy, so they will see each other often. Oyen is impressed, because he never imagined that they were the same age. After this, Yihyun's preparations to enter the academy are complete. The day of admission of new students to the academy has arrived. Everyone around them notices the presence of Oyen due to his great popularity. They also notice a beautiful girl next to them. Her name is Co Aina, who in the future would become one of the most popular raiders. Yihyun knows that if he could get her on his side it would be very beneficial for him, but this would not be easy, since Aina is very different from other people. In addition, he does not need to rush, as he already has the support of quite a few talented people. Yojung scolds him, telling him that even though she's pretty he doesn't have to stare at her so intently. Aina notices this, but just then the director of the academy, Jane, appears, welcoming the new students. A clear expression of resentment can be seen in the protagonist, as apparently this guy was involved in the death of his friend. Yihyun tells Yojung that he must keep an eye out, as no one knows the dangers that may exist in the academy males. She tells him that she has nothing to worry about. In the future Yojung would quickly become one of the top 3 students in the magic rankings. Still, Yihyun can't help but worry and is convinced that this time he won't let her die. The induction ceremony begins and the director announces that he has a special event prepared. A game where seniors and new graders steal name tags. At that moment a magic circle appears at the feet of the students, which would transport them to another field. Fortunately, Yihyun manages to hold Yojung's hand and in that way they are transported to the same place. On the other hand, Sunyi is chatting with Yosung, reminding him that that day would be the entrance ceremony. Yosung is sad, because she forgot to send him a good luck message and will no longer be able to do so since the event lasts 3 days and they are completely incommunicado. However, Sunyi had anticipated this, sending her a message from the teacher the day before. The protagonist replied that there was nothing to worry about and Yosung feels satisfied when she reads those words. Meanwhile, we can see that someone else appeared near where Yihyun and Yojung were. It was none other than Co Aina, the one who would change the way the wizard class was seen in the present and who would become an S rank raider after Yosung. Meanwhile, in the academy's control room, we can see the directors analyzing the new students. Instructor Kim Seo mentions that the profile of the cadets who changed their class has not yet been updated. The director replies that if they changed their path by now, then there's no point in hearing about them. In general, those people who sign up for the males academy are quite talented, but even among them there are some who are above the rest. An example of this is the case of Oyen. What the Academy Director really wants is to train at least one A rank raider, even if it means eliminating 100 C rank raiders in the process. All this with the purpose of choosing excellent gems to offer to a certain person. The hunt for first graders takes place on a blueprint created with magic, in which event about 5% of the students are failed and expelled each year. So they can't afford to let their guard down for a second, especially in front of Aina. An image of the director is projected into the skies, explaining the rules of the event. Within that plane, it is only possible to use skills of rank C or lower. Every time you steal someone's name tag, you earn points. These points can be used on the academy premises, so it would be a good idea to get more. If a senior steals a freshman's tag, they will receive 10,000 points. On the other hand, in the event that a new student achieves the label of an advanced student, they will receive 100,000 points. Since the Chain Lightning skill is A rank, Yihyun will not be able to use it. However, they never mentioned anything about the unique abilities. That said, Yihyun tells Yujung that they have to find shelter first, as they will be there for 3 days. Before leaving, Yujung mentions that it would be a good idea to take that person with them, since they look like a magician class and it would be better to have another new student with them. Yihyun knows that he is right, however he does not believe that he will be able to handle someone like Co Aina, because in his previous life there was an unfortunate event because Aina lost her sanity due to anger and endangered the lives of many. Yihyun replies that they can't be sure that she won't betray them, and that she doesn't seem to trust them one bit. Yujung ignores the protagonist's warnings and goes directly to Aina to invite her to join them. Aina simply replies that it seems that they will have to leave that decision for later, because just at that moment 2 silhouettes approach them. Shin and Quan, 2 seniors willing to earn points easily. The girl feels confused, because she only detected 2 people before arriving, since she cannot feel anything coming from the protagonist. Yujung says that they should escape, but Yihyun contradicts her, saying that they should capture them right there. They would also not be able to escape, as Quan possesses an ability that allows him to find anything within a range of 300 kilometers. If they don't defeat them right now, they might call more people and attack them together. Shin is willing to snatch their tags, but Quan warns him that there is something strange with that boy. The guy doesn't care about this and pounces on them with sword in hand. Yihyun dodges his attacks without much effort, to the point of making Shin completely nervous for not being able to land a blow. Yihyun stops the blade of the sword with only his hand and intimidates the guy by telling him that it's amazing that he survived all this time being so mediocre. He breaks the sword and Aina is surprised. Finally, he tells them that they have 3 seconds to leave their tags and leave the place, threatening to finish them off if they do not do so. Although Shin thinks that Yihyun is just a freshman specializing in magic, he can't understand why he looks at him with such menacing eyes. Fear invades him, but before he can make a decision, Yihyun acts. With a decisive blow, he eliminates Shin, stealing his tag. A notification appears stating that Shin has been eliminated from the game and Yihyun has earned points for his elimination. The Academy's instructors note that the protagonist has been the first freshman to eliminate another participant, surprising and capturing the attention of the supervisors. Meanwhile, Yihyun prepares to face Quan. Yihyun asks his friend Yujung to prepare to fight and sends her an invitation to form a team. Yujung is surprised by the strength Yihyun is showing because she has never seen him like this before. She agrees to join him without hesitation. On the other hand, Quan realizes that things have gotten complicated. Not only because he knows Yihyun is dangerous, but he believes that facing them in a 3-on-1 match would be too risky, even if they are rookies. Still, Yihyun and his team are not letting their guard down. Quan tries to use a strategy to escape, generating confusion with a swift attack on Yujung. However, Yihyun anticipates it, and although Quan thought that his strategy might have worked against a normal adversary, Yihyun is confident in his friend's abilities. Yujung proves that he is more than meets the eye, facing off with great skill. Casts a binding spell on Quan. Although his attack is strong, Quan tries to resist and counterattacks by throwing daggers. Yujung manages to block them with a magic shield. Yihyun observes the situation and worries, thinking that even Yujung might have trouble facing an experienced student alone. So he prepares his own attack, but stops when he notices that Co Aina, Yihyun's powerful teammate, also demonstrates her unique ability, summoning a holy sword. With this special ability, known as the Alfheim Falchion Sword, Aina hits Quan hard, who is defeated and eliminated from the game. Quan acknowledges, in his last thought, that he is facing monsters, referring to the incredible power of Yihyun, Yujung, and Aina. Once Kwon is eliminated, the game system confirms that Yu Jung and Ina have received points based on their contribution to the battle. Yi-hyun, at this moment, reflects on the strength and abilities of her companions, especially Ina, whom she previously underestimated. In addition, Ina reminds them about her offer to ally beforehand, showing an interest in forming a stronger team. Eventually, Yi-hyun forms a team with Yu Jung and Ina, consolidating their group and preparing for the next challenge. The group heads towards a nearby shelter in the Nightmare Forest. Yi-hyun is assessing the situation inside the shelter with Ina and Yu Jung. He knows that they can't stay hidden for long, as they need to go out to get food and, more importantly, to get points that will allow them to win the competition. Yi-hyun decides that the only way to move forward is by hunting down seniors, taking the initiative instead of staying on the defensive. A group of seniors is following in the footsteps of freshmen. As they investigate, they find signs indicating that the rookies have entered a nearby shelter, and one of the older students, clearly irritated, orders his team to stop the search and only keep an eye on the area for now. This student knows that the rookie hunt lasts 3 days and is confident that, eventually, the rookies will have to leave. However, just as they are talking, one of the older student's classmates, Kim Sung-hoon, is suddenly eliminated. This causes alarm and bewilderment among them, and a chase ensues when they try to catch Yu Jung, who seems to be responsible for the surprise attack. As she runs, Yu Jung taunts her pursuers, pointing out how embarrassing it is for them to move in such a large group to chase her. The scene then shifts to an ambush set up by Yi-hyun and his team. Yu Jung, following the plan, has managed to lure the older students into a dangerous area, a habitat for fungi that emit paralyzing spores. While activating a speed-boosting ability, Wind Boost, Yu Jung leaves the rest of the fight in the hands of Yi-hyun, who is ready to execute his next move. Older students fall into the trap, entering the area of paralyzing mushrooms. We see a flashback where Yi-hyun was in Lee Isong's lab. He asks her about how to deal with paralyzing spore fungi during the student hunt. Lee suggests using the ash tree sap, common in the Forest of Nightmares, although he clarifies that it only serves as a treatment and not as prevention, so it has to be used once they have already been affected by the spores. Yi-hyun listened to him attentively and thanked him for the help. Meanwhile, the group of older students, led by Park Song-hyuk, are worried about the danger of the paralyzing spores of the forest and contemplate retreating. However, Park insists on moving on, expressing his anger at seeing that a freshman student has defeated his classmate. Park, full of confidence, continued to lead the group, believing that the radius of the spores would affect everyone, including Yu Jung. He ordered one of his own to stay behind guarding the rear while the others continued to chase Yu Jung. They finally managed to reach her. Yu Jung, her face marked with determination, maintains a mocking attitude as she approached the group that was chasing her. Surrounded by the bright glow of the forest, she issued a silent threat, knowing that she had turned the situation into a veritable nightmare for her enemies. The group launched the attack, but without giving them time to react, Yu Jung activated his final trap. The paralyzing spore fungus he had prepared exploded, blanketing the area with dense, lethal air. Anyone within 50 meters would be immobilized for 2 hours. Both she and her enemies were paralyzed, but Yu Jung's face still conveyed a strong confidence. The scene changes to a few hours ago, in the Nightmare Forest, where Yu Jung advances with his companions. Yi-hyun gets the sap Isong recommended. Then he asks Yu Jung if he knows how to use the spell Change, which is used to change places with an ally of his. Yu Jung replies that of course he knows, and the protagonist, knowing this, comes up with an interesting plan. After seeing the explosion caused by the paralyzing mushrooms, Yi-hyun and Seo Ina set off. Yu Jung activates the change ability at just the right moment, leaving his enemy stunned. Yu Jung takes over with a smile, saying that it is no longer his turn, as the ability activates and changes positions. The enemy, bewildered and paralyzed by the spores, falls into the trap set by Yi-hyun, who arrives on the battlefield kicking the older student in the face. The latter, stunned, tells him that he is very stupid because he will also be paralyzed and left one of his members in the rear in case something like this happened. Yi-hyun tells him that his partner will not come. At that, a scream can be heard in the distance. He is his partner, who was eliminated at the hands of Seo Ina. The system awards 100,000 points to the team consisting of Min Yi-hyun, Kim Yu-jung, and Seo Ina for Song-hyuk's elimination. In the middle of the battle, Yi-hyun watches his fallen opponent. With a firm posture, he reminds him that he had already warned him that his companion would not arrive in time to save him. His enemy looks at him with eyes full of confusion and fear, realizing the trap he has fallen into. The enemy, still paralyzed by the spores, reveals with despair that both will be immobilized for 2 hours. He is confident that once the paralysis is gone, he will be able to beat it easily. However, Yi-hyun approaches with a firm step, making it clear that only his enemy is affected, this thanks to the blessing of hell that protects him from any anomalous state. The enemy, stunned, begins to question how Yi-hyun can move despite the paralysis. With a confident smile, Yi-hyun tells her that if she wants answers, she should ask the gods. The enemy, on the ground, barely manages to murmur a plea in the midst of his despair. Yi-hyun shows no mercy. With a decisive blow, the enemy screams in pain as the system announces the contestants' elimination. Again, Yi-hyun's team receives 100,000 points for elimination. With 2 opponents out, Yi-hyun watches the remaining group. With a satisfied smile, he comments that there are only 3 left standing. The system continues to announce the eliminations and points accumulated by Yi-hyun's team. Each time an enemy falls, the on-screen message awards an additional 100,000 points. One of the directors, visibly surprised, observes how the team continues to accumulate victories. Finally, the system reveals the ranking of students, placing Min Yi-hyun in the first place, followed by Kim Yu-young and Seo Aina in the second position. Yu-jung drinks the sap of the ash tree with effort, the remedy that will cure her of paralysis. After taking it, exhale forcefully and with a face of displeasure. Beside her, Seo Aina watches her intently and asks if she feels better. Yu-jung replies yes. Yu-jung seems to recover quickly and suggests that they should start moving towards the place where they agreed to meet with Yi-hyun. Seo Aina, thoughtful but determined, nods in agreement, and they both prepare to head towards the meeting point. As they walk through the forest, Seo Aina mentions that Yi-hyun seems to know a lot about magic. Yu-jung explains that it hasn't been long since Yi-hyun switched to magic class, just 3 months. She adds that she was the one who taught him the theories, which allowed Yi-hyun to master that skill in such a short time. Seo Aina is shown surprised by the revelation, asking if Yi-hyun was originally aiming for martial arts class. Yu-jung confirms that he did, remembering that Yi-hyun was obsessed with that class a few months ago and that he had never thought about studying magic before that. Despite what they already know about him, Yu-jung comments that the most impressive thing is not only the change of class, but that Yi-hyun also knew about the sap of the ash tree, something that has helped them recover from paralysis. Both Seo Aina and Yu-jung wonder how Yi-hyun acquired such specialized knowledge. The girls finally catch up with Yi-hyun, who is waiting leaning against a tree. Yu-jung greets him effusively. He asks him how the paralysis is going. Yi-hyun, with a relaxed attitude, comments that it seems that they both had it easy, to which Yu-jung responds by explaining that all he did was run and use a magic spell. Yu-jung asks Aina how she feels. She responds somewhat surprised, but assures that she is also fine. Yu-jung, for his part, praises Yi-hyun for his plan, admitting that it didn't go badly at all. Jokingly, Yu-jung comments that Yi-hyun usually seems more clumsy, causing him to get slightly annoyed and ask if he's calling him stupid. Yu-jung smiles and confirms it bluntly, while Seo Aina silently thinks to herself that even though they call him stupid, she finds him quite attractive. Seo Aina notices her thoughts and feels a little embarrassed, quickly pulling away as she reflects that it's not the time to have those ideas. Still, she justifies herself internally by telling herself that there's nothing wrong with being careful with her emotions. After a while, we see how Jae-hyun prepares a potion while Seo Aina watches him. He asks what he is doing, and Jae-hyun replies that he is creating an energy recovery potion. Jae-hyun mentions that he learned how to make the potion from a close friend, but clarifies that he failed many times before he succeeded. Kim Yu-jung laughs and tells him that he has no friends, prompting a mocking response from Jae-hyun, who sarcastically replies that she surely has many friends besides him. Seo Aina, impressed, comments that Jae-hyun is really impressive and seems much more experienced than them, as if he is a person with 10 more years of experience. This makes Jae-hyun nervous, as he thinks that Aina has been right with her intuition, even about how long she has lived. Yu-jung mentions that they must eat something to be able to continue tomorrow. She offers to cook, but Jae-hyun seems skeptical about his cooking skills. He suggests simply eating fruits, but Yu-jung insists on preparing something for them. Ji-hyun says that they can't trust Yu-jung to cook and makes him remember an event at school where his cookies ended up being purple. Yu-jung feels embarrassed, confirming the color, and remembers that she had even added blueberry jam to it. Jae-hyun comments that Yoo-jung is bad at cooking, and he also has no cooking skills. Seo Aina, however, offers to prepare something, mentioning that she can cook a little. Jae-hyun asks Aina if she is good at cooking, to which she replies that she lived alone with her grandmother, so she cooked every day for her. This makes Jae-hyun reflect, as there isn't much public information about Seo Ina's family. While Seo Aina cooks, Jae-hyun thinks about whether she lived alone with her grandmother because there was something wrong with her parents. It seems that Jae-hyun is curious about Ina's family past. The food is finally ready, and the characters express surprise at how good the dish looks. Seo Aina serves them, and everyone seems impressed by her ability. When they finally taste the food, Yoo-jung is amazed at how delicious it is, exclaiming how amazing it is to find something so tasty in that setting. Jae-hyun is also surprised, saying that he didn't expect to be able to eat something so delicious in a place like that. Meanwhile, Seo Aina smiles slightly and mentions to herself that she hasn't felt that way in a long time, hinting that she hasn't experienced such a warm and comforting feeling in a while. The scene changes abruptly. We move to a more formal room where the academy directors discuss the recent results of some students. They mention that Hoi-yeon, despite the high expectations they had of him, has reached only 4th place, which seems disappointing to the evaluators. In addition, they show surprise to see that the first 2 places are occupied by mages, which does not seem to be common in that context. The headmaster, with a sinister expression, comments on how intriguing it is that a team of mages has managed to defeat students of the martial class. The conversation continues, highlighting the level of judgment and bravery that was demonstrated in a critical situation, in addition to Jae-hyun's surprising ability to defeat a student in the martial arts class. As they investigate further, they realize that there is something mysterious surrounding Jae-hyun. In the profile they have of him, neither his class nor his aptitude appears, which generates even more uncertainty about who he really is. Tension rises when one of the adults files a report related to Jae-hyun, but does so with insecurity, suggesting that something doesn't quite add up. The director asks him firmly, wanting to get more clarity, as his curiosity about Jae-hyun grows. Managers find that their magical aptitude reaches an astonishing 97%. This revelation provokes a reaction of satisfaction in the director, who expresses that he is very pleased with the information. Eager to find out more about Jae-hyun's abilities, the director mentions that he wants to evaluate him personally, while watching Hoi-yeon on screen. The scene shifts to Jae-hyun and his team, who receive a reward of 100,000 points for their performance in the competition. Yoo-jung excitedly mentions that they have now reached 1,100,000 points, which should guarantee them first place. However, Jae-hyun insists that they must keep moving forward to get more points, as the other students are too scared to enter the Forest of Nightmares. Seo Aina and Yoo-jung agree, though the latter seems a bit exhausted. As they move forward, Jae-hyun prepares for what appears to be an imminent encounter. He cautiously warns his colleagues to prepare, since something is about to come. In a tense moment, the scene shows a powerful gust of wind, signaling the arrival of a new enemy. Jae-hyun realizes that the force they face is higher than he thought, possibly much higher than the C rank. The connection in subspace is unstable, and the restrictions placed on the contestants are temporarily deactivated, suggesting that the conflict is about to become even more dangerous. Seo Aina and Kim Yoo-jung show concern for Jae-hyun, asking him if he's okay as they try to understand how new students can deal with such a challenging situation. Jae-hyun identifies his opponent, which is Hoi-yeon, and is surprised to see him again under these circumstances. However, it seems that Hoi-yeon is unresponsive, leading to confusion in Jae-hyun, who wonders if his adversary can hear him. Seo Aina warns that something is not right with Hoi-yeon, suggesting that he seems possessed or out of his mind. Jae-hyun realizes that this strange behavior is the work of the academy's headmaster, Gu Ja-in, recalling similar events prior to his regression, specifically at the Millis Academy Festival, where Ja-in used his brainwashing ability, resulting in a traumatic event where many students lost their lives. Jae-hyun recalls that Kim Yoo-jung sacrificed himself on that occasion to save him, which further motivates him to resolve the current situation. He decides that his first goal is to bring Hoi-yeon back to his senses. At that moment, a side quest appears stating that he must save the student under the effects of brainwashing, giving him only 2 hours to complete the task. The reward for completing the mission will be a carte blanche with which you can copy another skill. Jae-hyun reflects on the value of this reward while keeping his focus on Hoi-yeon. Kim Yoo-jung offers to help him, but Jae-hyun declines his offer, telling them to get as far away as possible to be safe. He even jokes, asking them to rack up points for him while they're away. Yoo-jung, surprised by his attitude, complains that Jae-hyun seems to be taking the situation too lightly, as the person they are facing is Hoi-yeon, who is known as a martial arts genius. Jae-hyun maintains his confidence. He responds with a smile and asks them to trust him. Seo Aina also decides to leave with Yoo-jung, although the latter is not very convinced. We are shown a flashback of Hoi-yeon. In this recollection, Hoi-yeon reflects on the students' rankings and is impressed by how Jae-hyun and his team have managed to stay in the top spots, even with the restrictions that the magic class faces. Hoi-yeon, who had felt confident in his own performance, begins to secretly admire Jae-hyun, recognizing his greatness and superior abilities. After a moment of reflection, he feels the pressure to improve his performance. Although he has survived so far, he realizes that he still has time to achieve more. At that moment, he receives a strange communication from director Gu Ja-in, who appears disturbingly and asks him for a small favor. Without realizing it, Hoi-yeon falls under the control of the headmaster, who uses his brainwashing magic to manipulate his mind. Hoi-yeon begins to lose track of his own identity, while his mind is invaded. Disoriented, he wonders what he's doing there, but eventually, under the director's control, he remembers his new mission. Back in the present day, his mind is completely tainted, and under this influence, he unleashes a powerful A-rank martial arts technique, Polar Extreme. His skill and prowess in combat increase dramatically, attacking with a ferocity and precision he had not shown before. Jae-hyun, watching from a distance, notices the drastic change in Hoi-yeon and realizes that he is not the same as he was a few days ago. Hoi-yeon now moves with much greater skill, making it difficult for Jae-hyun to recognize him. Although Jae-hyun is aware that he has a physical disadvantage, he decides to confront him, while reflecting on how annoying the situation has become. However, despite Hoi-yeon's agility and physical strength, Jae-hyun is still faster mentally and reacts before Hoi-yeon can land critical hits. Throughout the battle, Jae-hyun reflects on the situation. Although he could eliminate brainwashing with one of his abilities, he decides not to do it immediately. He knows that they are being watched and does not want to give his enemy the satisfaction of an easy victory. In his mind, Jae-hyun imagines director Gu Ja-in, the man responsible for manipulating Hoi-yeon, smiling as he watches the match. With a defiant smile, Jae-hyun decides to show what he's capable of and start a more entertaining fight, albeit at the risk of this coming at a price. Meanwhile, viewers watching the fight are amazed by Jae-hyun's skill. One of the spectators wonders if she is really seeing what it looks like, a magical class fighting as if it were a martial arts class, and on top of that, winning. In the next scene, Hoi-yeon is weakened, bleeding as he tries to stay on his feet after the attacks. Jae-hyun approaches, giving him a short break and commenting that he didn't intend to take the fight that far, though he adds that Hoi-yeon is strong and will be able to withstand it. However, before they can finish the conversation, Jae-hyun activates a special ability, known as Flash Bomb, which unleashes a blinding flash, making it difficult for everyone watching to see. In the control room, the monitors broadcasting the fight begin to fail due to the explosion of light caused by the flash bomb. The instructors panic, wondering what's going on, as the view of the battlefield is blocked. Gu Ja-in, seeing this, realizes that Jae-hyun has used the ability to obstruct his vision on purpose, causing him enormous frustration. Finally, Gu Ja-in, clearly irritated, orders Jae-hyun to be called to his office after the event is over. He turns to instructor Kim Suk-ji-ai, who questions the swiftness of the decision, but Gu Ja-in cuts him off, asking him why he thinks Jae-hyun used a blocking spell in a situation where he had already won. Gu Ja-in, with a grim expression, concludes that Jae-hyun knows exactly what he's doing and how to increase his strategic value, leading to more frustration in Gu Ja-in as he realizes that Jae-hyun is playing at a more cunning level than he anticipated. After the chaos generated by the flash bomb and the disconnection in the control room, Yi-hyun finds himself in front of Hoi-yeon, who is weakened and kneeling from the injuries received in the fight. Determined to help him, Yi-hyun activates his absolute calculation ability, undoing the brainwashing effect that affects his partner. A flash marks the moment when Hoi-an regains control of his mind, and upon realizing that he was manipulated, he shows an expression of panic and bewilderment. Hoi-an tries to get up, but the pain overcomes him. With effort, he manages to tell Yi-hyun, surprised, that he doesn't understand why he attacked him so hard. Yi-hyun, showing a mixture of sincerity and a slight tone of apology, replies that he couldn't contain himself due to the circumstances of the fight and Hoi-an's skill. He, although still stunned, seems to accept the explanation while trying to calm his breathing. Yi-hyun approaches Hoi-an and explains that he had been under a mind manipulation spell, a high-level form of magic. Still in shock, Hoi-an quietly wonders how it was possible, vaguely remembering a strange voice in his mind, but unable to identify it. This alerts Yi-hyun, who ponders the situation and mentions that such magic is of an extremely high level, usually above rank A, which would be impossible to use in the academy due to the restrictions imposed for the event. With a serious expression, Yi-hyun begins to consider the possibility that someone has manipulated the rules of the academy or the subspace where the competition occurs to allow the use of these kinds of forbidden skills. Although the pieces still don't quite fit, Yi-hyun suspects that someone with great power is interfering with the hunting event and manipulating the students, possibly for hidden purposes. Yi-hyun is convinced that, with the time and challenges he will face at Millis Academy, he will truly understand the nature of the power held by someone like Gu Jarin. A notification confirms that Yi-hyun has completed the submission of saving a student under a brainwashing spell. As a reward, he receives a blank card, a special item that could be useful to him later. Hoi-an, still in pain, tries to get up and leans on his sword to stay upright. Exhausted and reflecting on his own performance, he wonders if he has reached his limit, noting that Yi-hyun does not have any scratches after the fight. This seems to affect him, but he manages to apologize, saying that he doesn't know how to thank Yi-hyun for helping him. Yi-hyun, with a nonchalant tone, replies that there is nothing to worry about and that, if Hoi-an can move, it is time for everyone to go their separate ways. He wishes him good luck before leaving, but Hoi-an stops him. Hoi-an, in a gesture of gratitude and humility, takes out his nameplate and hands it to Yi-hyun. He explains that, after losing the match, it is only fair that Yi-hyun keeps his badge, and also mentions that, although he was not as skilled as him, he managed to accumulate enough points. Despite Yi-hyun being reluctant, Hoi-an insists, stating that next time, during the Academy Festival, he will seek to regain his plaque and defeat Yi-hyun. Eventually, Hoi-an is officially disqualified from the event, and Yi-hyun receives a notification that he has earned an additional 10,000 points, which are split between him and his teammates, Kim Yu-young and Seo Aina. Satisfied, Yi-hyun looks at the reward and wishes Hoi-an luck before he disappears, preparing for whatever comes next in the competition. Jae-hyun remembers his former obsession with martial arts, a talent he had longed for in the past and that now, thanks to his training and experiences, he is slowly beginning to master. A ding sound announces the close of the 72-hour hunt event and all students are returned to the real world. Jae-hyun receives a notification that he has reached an impressive 1,530,000 points, a record amount in the competition. Around her, her co-stars, Seo Aina and Kim Yu-young, react in surprise. Seo Aina, disappointed, comments that with just one more hour they would have reached 1.6 million. As the three ponder the points, Jae-hyun points out that by multiplying the total by 10, the points are equal to real money. He estimates that they would have won 10,530,000 won, an unexpectedly high sum that leaves Kim in shock. Yoo-jung's excitement overflows upon learning that there will be additional bonus points, and imagining the possibility of an extra million, he can't help but express his joy outrageously. This causes everyone in the room to turn to look at her, embarrassing Jae-hyun, who asks her, resignedly, to calm down a bit. We see how instructor Kim Suk-ji appears in the room and addresses the students, capturing everyone's attention. The instructor greets those present and formally introduces himself to the group. Seo Aina and Kim Yu-young politely respond to the greeting, showing respect towards their instructor. The instructor then informs them that he needs to talk to the three of them, implying that the conversation should not happen in that place. With a steady gaze, he suggests that they move elsewhere to talk further. Jae-hyun asks if the conversation has anything to do with his performance at the recent event. Kim Suk-ji seems to confirm his suspicions implicitly, and without giving details, he instructs them to follow him. Jae-hyun, with some hesitation, asks if they should know where they are going. Observing the instructor's expression, he deduces that they are going to the general manager's office. The instructor confirms this assumption and reveals to them that Principal Gu Ja-in wants to talk to them personally.